Hello, everybody. Can everybody hear me? Great. Welcome. So today we have our Unsheltered Housing Initiative Prioritization training live for HMIS training. Your host is Rochelle Fajardo. I am the training coordinator about the HMIS team. We also have Keisha Franklin, that will be helping present with me on the coordinated entry team, Laura Bass, the director of coordinated entry, to also help answer some questions you guys might have. So to start, I am sharing my screen to kind of just walk through how GoToWebinar works as a setup. So first, non-presenters are muted, so only Keisha, Laura, and I are going to be able to be unmuted. If you look at the panel, you should see a questions feature. That is where we will try to answer as many questions as possible throughout this. If you guys have any questions throughout the webinar, we'll answer it through there. So this specific webinar is not intended to address specific client data situations. We are doing kind of a training and a walkthrough in how this new prioritization is going to work within the coordinated entry workflow. So if you guys have any very specific situations that need troubleshooting, please do contact the help desk or the coordinated entry specifically so we can handle those accordingly and provide the attention that it needs. The webinar materials and the recording of this session, which it will be recorded, will be available by tomorrow. So we'll have that sent out. It'll be attached to the articles and resources that'll be showing the rest of the content that we're providing today. This webinar will also take the place of the training of the users that are attending. So if you attend this webinar live today, we would then automatically complete that portion of the training in the LMS. And there is another fake client assignment regarding that I will have Keisha walk through as she starts presenting the material. So I'm just going to take a quick pause on that to see if I have any questions regarding the format of the way the webinar is going to be set up today and any expectations regarding. All right, I don't see any questions so far. So now I'll turn it to Keisha while I set up the screen to get our trainings started.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? I believe so. Hello, my name is Keisha Franklin, one of the coordinators. Yeah, can you hear me?
Are you unmuting?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Perfect. All right. Hello, everyone. Keisha Franklin, one of the program managers on the coordinated entry team here at All Chicago. I know many of you on the call, so hello. It's nice to see you again. As Rochelle said, this is UHI training for the housing resource specialists that are specifically doing like street outreach. And we are rolling this out first to the street outreach providers, and then in a couple of weeks / in the up and coming months, it will be rolled out to the rest of the community. But we wanted to release it to you all first, since you all do a bulk of the work. So definitely let us know your feedback. If you have any questions, please place them in the chat in the question box. But other than that, yeah, we'll get started. So I'm just going to go through each slide and read through. It is a lot of information. So a lot of this information already builds off of the housing resource specialist training that's already in the LMS and that most of you have already completed either years ago or just recently, a couple of months ago. So if you don't have that background knowledge, please go ahead and check that out in the LMS, but we can go ahead and get started. So this is the UHI Unsheltered Housing Initiative training. So the objective of this course is to provide you as HMIS users the background of the workflow for the UHI program. So next, what we're going to go through, this first section is going to be the introduction. Let me see if I have control. Yeah, all right. So you can go to the next slide. So this first section is going to be introduction. We're just going to provide a general program overview of what UHI is in case you are not aware and who is eligible for the program. And then we're going to the actual HMIS workflow. So how does it look in HMIS? Where is it in the assessment? And actually walk through how it should flow in your process of when you are assessing participants. And then lastly, we'll go over the post-assessment expectations. Next slide. All right, so a little bit of the background. So the UHI is funded by the Department of Housing and Urban Development, so HUD, by the Special NOFO, Notice of Funding Opportunity, to address the unsheltered homelessness in Chicago. So the UHI aims to drive collaboration and coordination of outreach, housing, and support services across the entire Chicago COC, right, to improve outcomes for individuals and families experiencing unsheltered homelessness. So we received $57 million, and it will be distributed over 3 years, and we fund 20 projects, which is a lot. Hence why you all are here today. So following distributing the special NOFO, HUD did issue guidance to all the COCs currently using the COVID community prioritization, including ourselves because we are still under our COVID prioritization until we, as a community, have come up with a new one to ensure that the people who are the most vulnerable and unsheltered individuals were actually being prioritized for housing. So HUD recommended that we develop an unsheltered specific prioritization to be developed. So that's why we are here today. So that started last year. In the fall and winter of 2023, Coordinated Entry Leadership Team, they began developing the UHI prioritization. And the prioritization will help assess these individuals across several key areas, which may indicate a return to homelessness or increased service need when transitioning to housing. Right, next slide. So who is eligible? So UHI prioritization, it evaluates individuals and families currently living in places not meant for human habitation. So the head of household is the one. Let me restart. So the whole head of household will remain eligible for UHI resources for 12 months based on the head of household's current living situation. So as a housing resource specialist, when you're going into the assessment and filling out the current living situation, you want to make sure that first of all, the assessment is in the head of household's name and that the current living situation lines up with the UHI prioritization, which is living in a place not meant for human habitation. Once the head of household has that for their current living situation, they are eligible for up to 12 months after that moment. So another thing to note is that chronicity is not required for the UHI PSH projects. Now, this is important because in general, a lot of the PSH projects in the coordinated entry system does require chronicity. However, for the UHI prioritization, it is not a requirement. So your clients do not have to be chronically homeless in order to be matched to PSH projects. If anyone falls under HUD category 4 of homelessness, which is the domestic violence, the gender-based violence category of homelessness, so that includes domestic violence, human trafficking, sexual assault, stalking, any of those things, that is okay, but they also have to meet the other 3 requirements here on the screen. And then last but not least, documentation. So the homeless letter and VOD, verification of disability for PSH, will satisfy the UHI eligibility for documentation. I will note that if you do a homeless letter, especially as a lot of you are the hands and feet on the ground, just make sure that the homeless letter is specific. Make sure you date it, make sure you name it and sign it. Say, for example, My name is so-and-so, so-and-so. At this organization, I have witnessed client X on the street, in an encampment, in an abandoned building, on the CTA. You just, however, whatever capacity you see participants in. They have been in this situation for X amount of time, and I can verify that. Please ask me if you have any other questions. So we want to make sure that the information is as specific as possible when it comes to documentation. All right, next up, unsheltered situations. So as I mentioned a little bit earlier, the head of household are the ones that have to be unsheltered to be eligible for the UHI resources. So in HMIS, this is indicated in the current living situation as place not meant for habitation. So HUD defined this as a public or private place not designed for or ordinarily used as a regular sleeping accommodation for human beings, including car park, abandoned buildings, public transportation, or like a train station, as some examples. So one of the things we will be checking for, so if you complete a UHI assessment, we want to make sure that everything in the UHI assessment also matches what's in the general coordinated entry assessment, making sure that that current living situation matches the information that you put in, just to make sure it's a seamless like data quality for the participant. Next, impact on the current community prioritization. Let me see. Okay, I can't see if anybody has any questions, so I will keep going. I hope I'm not going too fast, but the UHI prioritization will exist as a separate assessment alongside the existing community prioritization. So right now, our community prioritization is our COVID high-risk indicator, which most of you are already aware. That's on the client profile at the bottom of the screen, right? Is this person at high risk of receiving COVID, yes or no? However, the UHI prioritization does exist separately outside of that. So the UHI prioritization score will be replacing the COVID high risk indicator for those participants who are unsheltered. Okay, so if they are eligible for UHI and you did the assessment, everything lines up perfectly, that prioritization score that you that they will receive from the assessment will replace the COVID high risk indicator for those clients. And then for everyone else, they will still continue to use the COVID high risk indicator for prioritization. Then next, all right, it is quiz time. Let me see. Do we have any questions in the chat? Let me see if I can see that really quickly. Nope. Okay, so I'll keep going. All right, so fill in the blanks by choosing the correct answer. So the whole household will remain eligible for UHI resources for, what are the options? Based on the current living situation. Let's see. Gotcha. Okay, can you go back to the first one? So the whole household will remain eligible for UHI resources for 12 months. Based on the current head of household's living situation. As we stated before, they will be eligible if the head of household's current living situation is place not meant for human habitation, and they are eligible for UHI resources for up to 12 months based on that living situation. So let's submit and see if we are correct. Perfect, then we can continue on. All right, households that move into a sheltered location within their eligible period will no longer be eligible for services, true or false? Households that move into a sheltered location within their eligible period will no longer be eligible for services, true or false? Let me just give it about 2 minutes, get your answers formed in your head. And this one would be false. As we stated earlier, the head of household would be eligible for up to 12 months, even if they let's say they go to a shelter or something a week or two after they see you, they would still be eligible up to 12 months. Next question. So chronicity is not required for UHI PSH projects. True or false? Form your answers in your head. All right, that is true. Chronicity is not required for UHI PSH projects. Then I believe we have one more. So what are some examples of unsheltered current living situations? Select all that apply. So we'll just do multiple here. Emergency shelter, hospital stay, halfway house, tent, a safe haven, stay with family, CTA, car, or abandoned building. For the purposes of this example, we're going to do a tent at the local park, the CTA, the car, and the abandoned building. See, yes, we are correct. And then you all will also be able to review this in the LMS if you want to read it at your own pace. So you can continue.
And it looks like there is one hand raised, Tarek Brown.
Unfortunately, he can't unmute, so the best way to communicate the question is using the questions box or the chat if you're unable to navigate the questions box.
Thank you. Yes, please feel free to drop any questions in the chat or the questions.
Yeah, or if you're struggling, raise that hand and then we'll reach out to you personally. I know this is a different format than we're used to on Zoom. Thank you guys for being patient. Thanks for Keisha for the beginning of that. So I will take over for the HMIS portion. Again, I'm Rochelle. So the HMIS workflow overview starts in determining that eligibility and then navigating to the UHI assessment, and then you conduct the assessment and then update it as needed. So all the users on this call and that will be completing this assessment should already have gone through the Housing Resource Specialist training. So this is a continuation after that. So that first step is looking at the current living situation sub-assessment within the assessment. Again, step one of this starts after that workflow has ended. So the participant has already completed some type of coordinated entry assessment, and then we're only looking at the head of households record. So we're in the head of households record. They have completed a coordinated entry assessment, whether it's their first one or you're updating it. And then their current living situation is a place not meant for habitation. If it is anything else, they don't qualify, then at that point, you would then just end the assessment there. For participants and their records that meet all three, then head of household, coordinated entry assessment, and then place not meant for habitation as their living situation, we would then continue on with the steps of completing the UHI assessment. At that point, we are in the screen of the assessment, and then we would just navigate to that UHI prioritization assessment. So I'm going to do a quick little demo of what that looks like. So I am a housing resource specialist that is completing an assessment for John Smith. I am in their record. I have completed their record, and in their interim, they have updated that their current living situation is a place not meant for habitation. Okay. So now at this point, once they have told me that change has occurred, I would then scroll back to the top. We have an assessment. The assessment is called UHI prioritization. Click it, and that opens our assessment. And then we would then complete it as such. for if their current living situation at that point in time is anything else but, then we would then just end the intake there. Otherwise, you would then complete this assessment. Okay. It's the same steps whether you are doing the first assessment or an update assessment, it will be there. Okay. This is just saying if the head of household becomes eligible after the enrollment, then it must be completed within that interim review as opposed to the entry assessment. Okay. So then our next step here is going through and conducting the UHI assessment, which Keisha will tell us all about all the questions that are within it, and how they should be answered and how those are used as data points for the prioritization.
Yeah, so the UHI assessment is broken up into a few sections. First, you have the medical vulnerability questions, which you see the MV next to the questions. Then the behavioral health questions, the first time experiencing unsheltered homelessness, and then the reentry, who are recently exited from jail or prison in the last 3 months. And at the bottom, we do have employment and income. So these are the sections of the assessment. It's not that long. It's only a few questions, I think 10 or 13 questions each. And so let's get started. We're going to go through each question one by one, and just go through how you answer them. All right, so medical vulnerability. So the first question is, do you have open wounds on your body that require medical care? Simple response, yes or no. So the wound encompasses injection wounds, trauma wounds, skin damage, environmental exposure, frostbite, blister, sunburn. A lot of these usually are in places like the feet, common areas, with walking and being on the street a lot. So possible ways to ask participant, do you have any wounds or sores on your body? Do you have any wounds that you're having trouble healing? Or have you received any medical help for any wounds recently? The second question for medical vulnerability is, do you have difficulty taking any prescription medications as prescribed, right? So, what we're trying to get at is, does this client have any barriers to accessing the medications that they need? So this can include missing doses because they simply forgot or can't remember, missing doses due to any transportation limits or proximity to receiving the help that they need, or lack of access to the medication, or due to lack of storage capacity, as some medications require that it be refrigerated or stored in a cold, cool, dry places, or doses due to lack of food. As we know, many medications require that you eat food along with taking the medication so that you do not get an upset stomach. It will make you sick if you do not eat food with it. So just asking those questions about that medication and any barriers to assessing that. The next medical vulnerability question is, do you use any kind of medical tool or device to help you move, hear, breathe, or complete tasks more easily? This question is basically just getting at, does the client use any type of assisted devices? So that could be CPAP, any type of hearing aid, adaptive tool, mobility, a wheelchair, a walker, oxygen tank, anything like that. Simple response, yes, no, or NA. One thing to note for all these questions, if the client doesn't know or doesn't want to answer, we definitely want to please respond NA. Do not leave any of them blank. If the answer is yeah, just as she's highlighting on the screen. If they don't want to answer, or if they don't know, just respond NA versus leaving it blank. So the next question for medical vulnerability is, do you receive any kind of medical treatment that must be provided in a medical setting or cannot be provided to you while you are living outside? So this is getting at, is living in a shelter impacting this client's ability to access the medical services they need? So this would be things such as dialysis or methadone, or getting any kind of scans or infusions that they need to go to a treatment facility in order to receive it. Once again, the responses are yes or no. If they don't know or don't want to answer, then the answer will be NA. And then we only have 2 more questions in the medical vulnerability section of have you been pregnant in the last 12 months or given birth in the last year, yes or no. This one is pretty straightforward. Most people would know if they have been pregnant or have given birth, or if it is, yeah, it's pretty straightforward. And then the last medical vulnerability question is, how many times have you been to the emergency room for medical attention in the last 6 months? So the responses are 3 or more visits, 2 or fewer visits, which would be 1 or 2, or NA. If they do not know or not at all, please select NA. However, if they give you a specific number of times, just please select the appropriate response. We're just trying to get at, is this client a higher use of the emergency department, which is 3 or plus more times. Yeah, so within the medical vulnerability questions, there are, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 medical vulnerability questions. And then we go into, as you can see on the screen, these are the 6 right at the top. There's simply a drop down of yes or no. And then at the bottom, you can see, are they a higher use of the emergency departments? And then we go into the behavioral health questions. There are not as many. There are only, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. There are only 3 questions, and then the last one is observed. So the first question for behavioral health is, have you overdosed on any drugs in the past 90 days? Or have you been administered / used naloxone or Narcan in the last 90 days? Now, this might be a bit of a sensitive question. Some people are very open and will just answer right away. Some people might be a little more guarded, but that is okay. Regardless of how they answer, please choose your appropriate response of yes, no, or NA. If they choose not to answer or do not know, we want to know, has the client experienced an overdose or needed overdose reversal recently? Some possible ways to ask this is like during those overdoses, did someone use Narcan to reverse it? One thing to note is that for a lot of these questions in a UHI assessment, if while you're doing the coordinated entry assessment in general, you use it as a conversation, a lot of these questions will be answered. So by the time you even get to the UHI assessment, it's just more of asking clarifying questions and solidifying the yes or no for each response. The next question in this section, so in the last 90 days, have you detoxed from opioids or taken a break from using them? It's a simple yes, no, or NA. So detox or abstinence can include any time spent in jail or prison, as well as a medically assisted detox, including like fentanyl, for example, or Vicodin, codeine, morphine, any of the above, or any ones that aren't listed. So a recent detox or break from opioids is linked to a higher likelihood of overdose and it can help indicate should the individual use again, which is why we're asking the question. So possible ways to ask the participant, you could simply ask, have you stopped taking any opioids recently? Or have you been in detox in the last 90 days or about 3 months or so? Once again, they may or may not, depending on your rapport with the client, they may or may not ask or answer your question and be more guarded. If so, that is okay. You can put NA if they do not want to answer the question, and then keep moving on. The next question is, in the past year, how many times have you been to the ER or been hospitalized for mental health or psychiatric reasons? And so this question is going to, has the client been taken to any mental health treatment services recently, whether on their own will or petitioned by a service provider, or it can even be like a family member? So instead of yes or no, we have 3 or more visits, 2 or fewer visits, which would be 1 or 2, and not applicable or none at all. Some possible ways to ask this is that, has anybody required you to go to the hospital emergency room for health reasons, whether you wanted to or not? And then our last behavioral health question is actually an observational question. So please do not actually ask the participants the following 2 questions that are on the screen. So just observe, and then as you're observing and doing the assessment, you can fill them out based on the knowledge and your experience with the participant. So do you observe any of the following? Signs of severe and persistent mental illness, including over or underdress for the weather, wearing a lot of clothing during the summertime or wearing not enough clothing during the wintertime, responding to any type of internal stimuli, delusions, or hallucinations, requires frequent visits from outreach due to safety concerns, which is understood to be high risk or vulnerable by the outreach provider. So that's you all on this call. Signs of social isolation. So individuals have limited engagement with peers or other social providers or other service providers, or things like their tent is located away from others or is in an isolated location. So these responses are the same: yes, no, and nay, if it doesn't apply or if they refuse to answer. And then the second question that you do not ask is just for observation, is based on your knowledge of the participant. Do they require frequent requests for crisis intervention or wellness checks? So then if so, do they have any reports from DFSS or across the police or fire department? Yes, no, and nay as well. And if you do not know, if they do not answer, always answer NA instead of leaving it blank.
I'll just add for these observation questions, there's a question: what happens to a person's score if you select an A? So if NA is selected, a person does not get points for that specific section or question. And if you do not have knowledge of the person to answer these questions, then you would select an A. So the observation questions are really, you may have a long-standing relationship with a person. You may have observed them multiple times in multiple contexts. You may be meeting them for the first time. So you would just be answering these questions based on what you observe or what you have knowledge of based on your relationship with the person.
Great, thank you for that, Laura. So we went over the medical vulnerability questions and the behavioral health questions. So then the middle section is it's just one simple question: first time experiencing unsheltered homelessness in the last 90 days. So is this your first time staying outside? Simple yes or no. We just trying to get at, have they ever stayed outside before, or are they new to this unsheltered homelessness? And then how long ago, if yes, did you start staying outside? 3 months or less, or more than 3 months? And even with this question, you might get a bit insight already just from the prior living situation and current living situation already within the assessment. So even as you're just having a conversation with people, just make sure to be diligent and actively listening and to whatever they're telling you, so that you don't have to repeat information. And then let's see, the next question is on reentry. Have or exited jail or prison in the last 90 days or 3 months? Simple, yes or no. Yeah, that's pretty much straight to the point. Did they recently release jail, yes or no? And then the last medium question before we get to employment income is the triage housing. So for those of you that don't know, triage is a transitional housing model for participants who are interested in short-term housing option. It also comes with stabilization services before enrolling in rapid rehousing. So for example, somebody might have been in a encampment for a few years. They say, hey, they started working with you as a service provider, as a street outreach worker, and now they've been matched to housing. But now that it's happening, and it seems to be happening so fast, they may or may not be ready to actually move into that housing. So the triage is an option for in-between phase, to help them get prepared, to help them stabilize, to do whatever they need to do to be able to move on to rapid rehousing and to be successful in that program. So that's the idea behind this. So it's meant for flexibility for the clients who may be a little anxious about entering housing, especially if they've been on their own for so long or can't really rely on other people, or just a lot of things happen throughout life. High need support if the client should want them, and it's supposed to create a slower and smoother transition to permanent housing. So if the opportunity for participants to live in transitional housing are prepared to move on their own apartment through rapid rehousing. So if a participant answers yes to this triage housing question, it doesn't guarantee that the housing will be available. And it doesn't mean that the participant have to accept the triage housing if it is offered. So let's say they are in encampment. Originally, when they first saw you, they said, yes, that sounds great. I will love the extra support before I move into more permanent housing. Let's go for it. But then once the time actually came to move into triage housing, if they do not want it, they do not have to move inside. They can continue on in their journey. And then last but not least, we have the last three questions, which are employment and income. Very simple. Would you like assistance applying for benefits, such as SSI, SSDI, any mainstream benefits, such as like SNAP, Medicaid, Social Security? The responses, you can choose, there are quite a few between SSI, SSDI, the mainstream benefits, both, no, I already have the benefits, or I'm not interested. The client doesn't know, the client prefers not to answer, or data not collected. So just a few more options, but all very important. Please select the one that best fits your client's needs. And the second question is, are you interested in receiving employment services to obtain work? Yes or no? So employment services are available to the individuals, to those who would like it for entering housing. So if they are interested, please use the appropriate response so they can be referred to this resource and be contacted. So that's simply yes, no, client doesn't know, prefers not to answer, or data not collected. And then the last question in the employment and income section is, do you have a disability or health condition that limits your ability to work? Now, once again, a lot of this is reviewed over in the coordinated entry assessment. And so as you're going through that and you realize, hey, this person might qualify for UHI, just remember a lot of those answers that they told you previously while you were doing that, and then go ahead and confirm it for the UHI assessment. Yes, no, client doesn't know, prefers not to answer, or data not collected. Do we have any more questions before we? Give me 1 minute to get back to my screen. All right, so the next section. And let me find my screen. Give me 1 minute. All right, so the next section. So the assessment impact on prioritization and services. So the UHI prioritization assessment, so all those questions we just went through with medical vulnerability, behavioral health, first time experience in unsheltered homelessness, the re-entry questions, and then the employment and income questions at the end. They all receive different points, which is what we were going over a little bit earlier, to prioritize people experiencing unsheltered homelessness for housing and different services. So the more question our participant answers yes, which I think somebody asked in the chat, the more points they receive on the assessment. Okay, so the higher the points mean the higher the likelihood of receiving a housing referral. And so if you scroll down a little bit, so participants can decline to answer any of the questions and still continue on with the assessment. If they do decline, As we stated earlier, to answer any of the questions, please just select NA to those questions versus leaving them blank. And they do not receive points for any answers or any questions they decline to answer. And so these are the possible points. So for the medical vulnerability questions that we went over, if a participant answers yes to 3 or more of them, they can get the max points of 4. If they answer yes to 2 of the items, it's 2 points. Yes to 1 of the items is 1 point. And if they don't answer yes to any of the medical vulnerability questions, they don't get any points for that section. For behavioral health, if a participant answers yes to 2 or more of those questions, they can get a max of 2 points. If they answer yes to only 1 of the questions, they could get 1 point. And if they don't answer yes to any of them, it's 0 points. For the first time experiencing unsheltered homelessness, if the participant answers yes to the first question for the 3 months or less, and to the second question, they can get 1 point. And any other combination of answers is 0 points. Okay. For the re-entry questions about have they recently exited jail or prison in the last 3 months, yes or no? If they answer yes, that would be 1 point added to their score. If they answer no, they do not get a point for that. So the score can range anywhere between 0 to 8 points. But yeah, if they answer yes to any of the triage housing question, once again, it doesn't guarantee that the triage housing will be available, or that they have to accept it, even if it is available and they decide they don't want to use it. So another thing to note is that those who are interested in the employment and income services, which is those last 3 questions in the UHI assessment, they will be contacted directly by the service provider. And so the employment and income programs, they use the contact information within HMIS to try to contact the participant. So one of the things that we also emphasize in the general training is that we want to make sure that the client contact information is updated. That is basically how we reach out to them for anything, for matching, for referrals, for services. And so definitely, every time you see someone, make sure you're updating that contact information and or confirming that the information is still accurate and true. All right. Let me see. Okay, we went over. Go ahead.
Oh, no. So the last step after completing that assessment would just be to update it accordingly. So this is always done in the interim review. So it must be updated within 90 days. So it has the same requirements as any coordinated entry assessment. We have to keep them active, even though, again, remember that eligibility is for that whole year. So when updating an UHI eligible participant's record, make sure you're reviewing it and it aligns with their current situation. So again, I am going to show, all right, show how this looks. So we didn't show the rest of the assessment, so I kind of just wanted to quickly look through that with you guys after she went over all the questions in depth. So again, they're all yes or no question, just drop downs. This is what the observation question looks like. It has all of the other questions right here. Just take a quick glance of it, and then you would then save and exit. When you are updating it, you would just change the answer that you would receive it here. So I will put an answer to some of these questions, save it, create another update to show you how we would change some of these questions real quick. I'm going to make sure every question has an answer. Then I would then save and exit. To update this assessment, I would then add another interim review. It must be an update. Save and continue. Navigate to that UHI prioritization. And then I would go ahead, if they don't have any more open wounds, I would just change it to no. Or any of the other questions. Maybe they've been to the ER a lot more this time around, 3 or more visits. Anything else that has remained the same, I would leave. But again, I would review it with the participant in front of me, see any of these questions have changed, and then click save and exit. And then those would then be recorded with the new timestamp. So to kind of do a quick knowledge check, what are the requirements participants' record must meet in order to be eligible for the UHI prioritization program? So as a reminder, they must be place not meant for habitation. The current living situation must be place not meant for habitation. So then automatically this one is not one of the eligibility. So not just any homeless situations, it has to be specifically place not meant for habitation because they need to be unsheltered. The participant has completed the coordinated entry assessment, so that is a requirement. So this would be the opposite of that. So they need a coordinated entry enrollment to even access the assessment at all. So that has to be completed. Any member of the household can qualify. That is not a requirement because it must be that head of household. So we're kind of trying to nail these 3 eligibility requirements in: head of household, after coordinated entry assessment, place not meant for habitation. When updating the participant's record within blank, make sure to review this assessment to ensure that all data remain the same. Any changes should be updated by changing the response. Again, as a reminder, all coordinated entry records must be updated within 90 days. In the HMIS, where in the client record should an update be completed? So is it follow-up, interim review, case plans, or the entry assessment? So this is something we should be very familiar with. Updates happen in the interim section here, not the follow-up. So the first notepad there. So interim review. Completing the UHI prioritization assessment will allow participants to be matched with housing and support programs designed for individuals living in unsheltered locations and eligible for additional housing resources across the city. So that is true. The assessment has to be completed so that that information gets communicated to the matching team that they should be in that prioritization pool. So true. A participant does not want to answer the question about recent overdoses. What should the Housing Resource Specialist or HRS do? Select all that apply. Answer the overdose question. Yes, so that would not be what an HRS would do because that would be opposite than what they provided. So that is wrong. Provide the participant information about how the information in the assessment will be used. That is definitely one of the questions. So a lot of times participants don't want to answer questions because they're not sure about what this information will be used for. They're afraid, so just want to inform participants about why this information is important. Exit the UHI assessment without completing. As we mentioned, if they are allowed to decline, but please just answer the question anyway. Just answer it as NA if they don't provide a real answer. If the participant does not want to answer a specific question, answer NA, as I just mentioned, and continue with the assessment. if a participant answers yes to the questions asking if they are interested in support with employment or income, an employment or income service provider may reach out to the participant to screen them for services. And this is true. Those questions are directly related, directly communicated to the employment and income program, who then creates the referrals to bring participants to those providers. And that is it for that quiz there. And then I will bring it back to kind of wrap it all up to Keisha.
All right, so last little bit. If any of you have any questions, please place them in the question box or the chat. But just the overview of the assessment expectations. So number one, make sure to review the UHI assessment as records are updated within 90 days. I think a lot of times it is when completing updates, it's easy to gloss over some information. We want to make sure that, as Rochelle mentioned earlier and showed you, that as you're updating the coordinated injury assessment, you're also updating the UHI assessment within, the full coordinated injury assessment, right? So moving over from that HUD tab over to the UHI tab, reviewing those questions and making sure that those answers are still correct, because a lot of times some information can change, life happens. So just making sure that as time goes on, you are updating not only their assessment, but also their UHI assessment within the 90 days. Number two, completing the UHI assessment does not guarantee housing for eligible participants. We stated that earlier, that there simply is a great need right now for housing, and resources are limited. So it is not a guarantee for participants. And we encourage you to be as transparent as you can be. Transparency is the name of the game. So if you need to be, more informed to be able to talk to participants, definitely reach out to us here with the UHI team, the employment and income team, or coordinated entry team to ask any questions you may need to be able to go out there with confidence and have these conversations. Number three, if the head of household has a current living situation of place not meant for habitation, their household is eligible for 12 months, regardless of if they move into a sheltered location within that time frame. Once again, chronicity is not required for the UHI prioritization, and even if they are in a sheltered location, even after doing the original UHI assessment, they are still eligible. So please make sure you continue to update that UHI assessment and their profile. I believe that is all from our end, but does anyone have any questions?
So been responding to a couple of questions in the question box, but a couple of things I'll just say out loud. One is that we will be rolling this prioritization out over time. So this is the first group that is receiving this training. Definitely, if you have feedback about the training, please let us know. But as you are reassessing, as you're completing updates with participants, or you're completing new assessments with participants who are experiencing unsheltered homelessness, please start using these questions to assess or to reassess participants. We will not start using the score for prioritization until the rollout is complete. So until housing resource specialists have had the opportunity to reassess as many existing participants as possible. And so after this training, we'll continue to do additional trainings for other folks in our system who complete coordinated entry assessments. There's also a question about what we should tell participants if they ask why this information is needed. And so I would say the goal of these prioritization questions are to identify participants who are most vulnerable or who are at highest risk to help prioritize people for housing. So a lot of the feedback we receive from the community is that people were really concerned about participants who are living outside with medical vulnerabilities, people who are living outside with high mental health needs, or who are at high risk of overdose, participants who are new to living outside and participants who've recently been discharged from jail or prison. So that's kind of how these questions came to be. And so I think kind of in your own language or based on your own relationship with the participant to let them know it's really to understand kind of their housing needs and the risks that they might be facing due to experiencing unsheltered homelessness. And the other thing I'll just emphasize what Keisha said, which is that once someone has answered these questions one time, they will continue to be eligible for Unsheltered Homelessness Initiative resources for up to 12 months, even if they are perhaps bouncing in and out of shelter or they're going between being in shelter and being unsheltered, because I mean, one reason is that the work group wanted to ensure that participants were not discouraged from accepting shelter if it was available to them, and we're not kind of giving up housing opportunities by accepting temporary shelter.
Thank you, Laura. Does anyone else, we're almost at time, just about 4 minutes left. Does anyone else have any lingering questions? Once again, we have some coordinated entry folks on the line. We have some UHI folks on the line that can also answer questions, and also some HMIS folks. So, and if you think of anything even after this training, please let us know. Shoot us an email. And we would love your feedback on the training and what you think about it, how we can better improve it, because you are the first iteration of this training since you do a bulk majority of the work. And so we want to make sure that what we are putting out makes sense and is clear and is excellent, to help you all do your job and make your lives easier. So please just let us know about any feedback, things that you like, didn't like, anything we can emphasize more, clarify more as we continue to train the broader community.
I wanted to invite Ted Barza from the UHI team. Ted, if you wanted to say a couple words about the triage housing model.
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. So the triage housing model is a new program model available to the community. Keisha did a really good job of providing the overview. There's currently one project that is live. It is a joint THRH project. As Keisha mentioned, the intent really is for participants who are interested in permanent housing but just need a little bit more time to get to that, and therefore that's where this new program comes in. Again, it's structured as a THRH model to provide that time for folks to be ready for permanent housing. Long term, I think this assessment will be the way to ensure that participants are forwarded towards this project. And until then, we also have an inbox that can be used. So if anyone has a participant who might be interested in this program model, they can use the inbox, and I'm sure that we'll provide that with any follow-up information, with the idea that if you know someone who might be interested and eligible for this program model, you would email the inbox for the time being. And once this prioritization rolls out, we'll be using the questions in these additional assessment to make sure the participants who are interested are directed towards this project. If you have any questions, you should also feel free to reach out to me, and I'm sure that we'll provide my contact information with the follow-up.
Thank you so much.
All right, everyone. Thank you for your time. So there is a fake client assignment, which many of you have already completed just for the housing resource specialist training in general. But we have updated it to reflect some of the UHI proponents we talked about today so that you can have practice within the HMIS training site and completing this assessment before doing it live with participants. So we will be sending that out. And so when you have completed the new fake client assignment, please send myself and Emily Cruz an email. We'll send all this out via email. An email with the name of your fake client, or if you already have a fake client within the assignment, please just update it to reflect the new information that we will be giving you. And then we'll give you our feedback and reflections on how you did with the UHI prioritization and the training. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. But that is all from us.
Quickly adding to answer the question, will there be a version of this available to women at any point? Are you asking of female? Oh, seems like Laura already answered it. Okay, but this will be, the presentation will be available. There will be a PDF version of the assessment. In the follow-up, we will include all the help desk links that are going to be relevant to this prioritization too.
So will there be a triage program open to women? So the program that is operating right now only serves male identified people. Ted, can you confirm if the next program coming online can serve all genders? Ted might have had to jump off, so I believe the answer is yes. I believe the next program will be able to serve women. I will confirm and follow up, Stephanie. Thanks so much for the question.
All right, thank you, everyone. That will conclude today's training. Once again, don't hesitate to reach out with any questions or with your fake client assignments. All right, have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.